So, to begin, utilitarianism is a teleological theory. That is, it's realization focused. It begins with a conception of the good and then derives what is right or what is just based upon the realization of that good. So it's our first teleological theory of justice, and one of the one of the founding modern theories of justice in the Western world, beginning of the 19th century, and it was dominant especially in Anglo-American thinking for over 100 years. It was the dominant theory until John Rawls came along and called into question utilitarianism. But it still remains a prominent theory of justice and a general moral theory as well. And it's teleological in that it's realization focused. And one of its, it's very elegant, I think, as a theory in its simplicity, in that it makes a certain intuitive sense. And so it's no surprise that it was very prominent and remains a very prominent theory, moral theory, and theory of justice. One of its appeals is its grounding in or its concern for a general collective well-being, the common good. So it appeals to some notion of the common good as the standard of right, the standard of justice in the world. So that's appealing. It also identifies a single conception of the good, grounded in sentience and in consciousness, as the utilitarians attempted to rationally uncover the single most important good in the human experience. And they call that utility. And mainly the first iteration of utilitarianism, utility was defined as happiness and thereby defined as pleasure and exemption from pain. So a very sensate kind of conception of the good. But the intellectual search for something, a common good that was the most basic, was defined originally in the theory as pleasure or happiness, which is a subjective state of affairs, an individual subjective state of affairs. And coupled with that was the desire, or not the desire, but the principle that of equality. So utilitarianism has an egalitarian foundation in that we should consider every sentient beings. We should equally consider every sentient being's a good in our calculation of what is right. So we should weight equally everyone's good, defined in terms of utility as originally pleasure. So that so it appeals to equality, it appeals to a common good, and it appeals to a very basic conception of the good. And utilitarians have argued that we should find what is ultimately good for human beings. And this goes back to the to the Greeks, the ancient Greeks. Aristotle, for example, argued that all people all human beings are seeking one common good in their lives, and that is happiness. So the utilitarians pick up on that idea, but define Bentham, Jeremy Bentham in particular, defines happiness in terms of sensate pleasure as opposed to pain. So the good is what is pleasurable, the bad is what is painful. And that's an individual, subjective state of being or state of affairs. Later in the theory, as the theory developed, preference satisfaction became an alternative conception of utility. That it wasn't pleasure or pain per se, but it was how satisfied individuals were regarding their preferred states of affairs. So preference satisfaction was became an alternative conception of the good and of utility in the theory. So we would consider each person's satisfaction in terms of what they prefer, what their tastes are, what they desire. Are their desires being fulfilled, satisfied? And to what degree are they experiencing satisfaction? John Stuart Mill, one of the founders of utilitarianism, the kind of second generation utilitarian, his father, James Mill, and his colleague, Jeremy Bentham, developed the original theory of utilitarianism. And then John Stuart Mill followed his father and his father's colleague, but argued that pleasure and pain is a very crude, and even preference satisfaction is a very crude measure of human good, and that we needed a more sophisticated conception of utility in the theory. And John Stuart Mill argued that utility should be defined in terms of human development, that the development of individuals' intellectual and moral powers were what is good. And there's an Aristotelian flavor to that as well. And Mill wrote some of the more elegant defenses for human development as a good in the history of Western philosophy. And he argued that why we want liberty, for example, why a right to liberty should be fundamental to justice, is that that right will assure the maximization of human development in the population. Without a right to freedom or to liberty, the population would become underdeveloped. Their potential would not be realized, and therefore the collective, the aggregate human development would be diminished. It's one of his essay on liberty is one of the more eloquent defenses of liberty from a utilitarian perspective. If you ever want to read it, it's worth reading. So we have these, in the theory, in the tradition itself, we have these different conceptions of utility that emerged historically in the tradition. Economists also, many economists would define utility as some kind of economic productivity measure, perhaps gross domestic product could be, or a unit of economic productivity could be conceived as the good. Although life is bigger than economic activity, as we all well know. But there has been, as a result, there has been utilitarianism was very attractive to economists as a moral theory and a theory of justice, and remains so. Most economists are utilitarians, it seems, although not all, but a lot of them tend to gravitate to utilitarianism. So that's some of it. That's its core elements or main elements. And then based upon utility, equal consideration, an idea that what is right is that which serves the common good or realizes the common good. The utilitarians define the right or the just as that which maximizes aggregate utility, and that's the standard principle, the core principle of utilitarianism. That what is right or what is just is that action or rule or policy that maximizes aggregate utility is that which is right or just. So the pursuit of justice or the analysis of justice is a calculation and measurement of aggregate utility. So the utilitarian looks to the sum total of the good as the measure of what is right. It also purports that there's a full compatibility regarding interpersonal comparisons, that your unit of pleasure is equivalent to my unit of pleasure, or your unit of preference satisfaction is roughly equivalent to mine, and vice versa. So we can make, and this is maybe a problem with the theory, we can make interpersonal comparative assessments of utility, and that's required for a measurement of the aggregate utility. So we sum up everyone's pleasure or everyone's happiness, everyone's preference satisfaction, or everyone's human development, whatever the notion of utility is, and then we sum the total, and then we compare totals, action Y versus action X. If X has a higher sum, that is right. To do X is right. To do Y is wrong. Or to have X law versus Y law, Y law, whatever maximizes that we can predict, maximizes utility comparatively, is what we should choose as just. It also suggests there are no boundaries between persons in the sense that we can sum total everyone's pleasure. And there's so the boundaries between individuals, although it's based upon an individual consideration, equal consideration, the strict boundaries between individuals becomes kind of blurred in the calculation of aggregate utility. And that's connected to the full compatibility of interpersonal comparisons. So our pleasures are all the same, or our preference satisfaction is all the same. There's no real difference in the theory. And that might not be accurate, but we might experience things differently. And Bentham famously said that pushpin was equivalent to reading Shakespeare. I don't know exactly what pushpin is, but it was some kind of silly game the English used to play. A very simple, silly game. He said, that's, you don't have to read Shakespeare. You just play pushpin if it makes you happy. It's all the same. It's all the same happiness. It doesn't matter. watch a cartoon or watch a Shakespearean play. It doesn't matter. It's all the same. It's your internal state that matters, how you experience it. Yeah, often.
Okay, you said here that the sum of action in the utilitarianism perspective, they consider it as the right thing. So, from what you say, it's look like that each culture will use utilitarianism. They have a right of using utilitarianism different because in some culture they will say that, for example, wearing hijab is more of them will say it's right to do it, so they will see it as right. In other culture, they will look at it's not good. A lot of people will say it's wrong. So in the utilitarianism perspective, the people should not do it.
Yes, and it's not right or wrong. If you want to wear a headscarf and it makes you happy, wear your headscarf.
Where is the next one to now?
And if someone if and if the collective, half the population enjoys wearing a headscarf, then you probably have grounds for it being just or right to wear the headscarf because the aggregate utility will be high. In another culture, wearing headscarves may be frowned upon or not acceptable or superfluous and not give anyone any pleasure or pain, and it's so the utility will be low. It doesn't have anything to do with culture, though. It's not a cultural consideration in utilitarianism. It's how much pleasure or how much happiness or how much satisfaction is being experienced in the population. Whatever that is, whatever that calculation is, will determine what is right or wrong. So it makes no, it's utilitarianism is intended to be culturally neutral. Because they're seeking a universal good, right? Pleasure is and satisfaction are the same everywhere among human beings and among all sentient beings. So your cat has the same pleasure as you do, or your singing bird, if birds are sentient. Uh, they experience pleasure and pain. So if we should include them, and whatever their experience of it, whatever pleasure or pain their experience, that we could enter that into the calculation.
So they have the same unit, the animal as the human.
Yeah.
They give them the same unit.
Yeah. Which may be problematic, but that was the idea. Because utilitarians have argued. Peter Singer, a famous contemporary utilitarian, has argued for the inclusion of animals, etc., in our moral calculation on these terms. That they're sentient also. They experience pleasure and pain. They experience preference, satisfaction, or its lack as well. Maybe not as sufficient. And this might be problematic because the comparison between a human being's pleasure and a bird's pleasure may be quite different. We assume it's different.
So they care about minorities, or it doesn't matter?
Doesn't matter. And this might be we'll see this is a problem. Could be there's a potential problem. So we might be able to there are trade-offs here in the theory. We might trade off someone's pain, a small group of people's pain, for the pleasure of a larger group. And that would be just according to utilitarianism. So let's say we enslave 1% of the population to serve us, and that enslavement increases the satisfaction of the rest of the population to such a degree that it cancels out the pain and suffering of those enslaved. And according to the strict rule of maximizing aggregate utility, that would be just. And of course, that's problematic.
So
That might be the fatal blow to utilitarianism, that possibility.
So there is no like an ethical standard or like religious standard for utilitarianism.
This is the ethical standard. So the moral standard is that which what is right is that which maximizes aggregate utility. Full stop. Now, this can be applied to individual cases, individual actions. Is it right for me to take the remote control after class for myself because I need a remote control? And that would increase my preference satisfaction. But we would have to compare that to everyone's, other people taking the remote control and increasing the dissatisfaction of anyone who comes into the room after that. So if my satisfaction isn't higher than the dissatisfaction of all those subsequent users of the projector, then it would be wrong for me to take the remote control. And so we can apply it to individual cases. We can also apply the principle to rules. So we could establish rules or laws or policies as just or right because we have demonstrated that following this rule or this policy will lead to the maximization of aggregate utility. And a lot of times in public policy, this kind of calculation is made, usually in economic terms. Well, politicians often speak, legislators often speak of, well, this policy will increase the gross domestic product. Therefore, it must be right. It is right. It is right.
So from what I understand, they don't look at the consequences, just
They do look at consequences. And the consequences, whether it increases or decreases happiness or satisfaction. So it's consequential. It's consequentialist. It looks to the outcome of the rule or the action and evaluates consequences in terms of aggregate utility. Whether something, so you have a policy choice, you have 4 policies. How do you choose? What is the right policy from a moral point of view? The utilitarian answers, the right policy is that, the morally right policy is that which maximizes aggregate utility. So we'll do a comparison. Policy A versus B versus C versus D. And if C has a higher aggregate utility, we should choose C. Brilliant, right? Brilliant.
Doesn't it also get into who's in the room to decide? I keep thinking of days gone by where the majority of people making the rules and deciding things were white males. Women could vote, and minorities had rights to speak of in society. So then when you get certain groups of people together and say, what does the majority want? You would get a different idea compared to actually comparing and asking everyone.
Right. So a utilitarian would completely agree with you. We have to ask everyone. We have to measure everyone's satisfaction. We can't just measure the majority satisfaction. We can't just survey white males, right? And get their satisfaction, their unit of satisfaction. It has to be egalitarian. If we just did that, if we took a segment a slice of the population and just calculated based upon that slice, that would be invalid. That would invalidate the outcome for the utilitarian. So there's a strong, in a certain sense, there's a strong egalitarian disposition to utilitarianism. And John Stuart Mill, for example, argued for women's rights and thought women in his time, middle of the 19th century in England, were oppressed, and that couldn't stand. It was unjust on utilitarian grounds. That half the population was suffering under oppression, and if you calculate in terms of development, that was wrong. So actually, the original utilitarians were it was almost revolutionary. It was revolutionary, their perspective. And they championed many liberal causes in England at the time. And they were disdained by more conservative citizens at the time. So it would, but it's still, there are some, you're onto some problems, though, I think, with the theory. Does this make sense? Whether you agree or not.
Mm-hmm.
It's elegant, isn't it? There's a simple elegance to it. Let's see if it holds up. Very compelling in certain ways. You can see why someone would be attracted to the theory. It's not unreasonable. One of the critiques of utilitarianism is that it challenges the commensurability of the good, challenges the idea that we can reduce all goods to one fundamental good. That goods that may not be commensurable with each other, and that the pursuit of a single standard of the good opens up the possibility of trade-offs. And this is a significant problem, as already mentioned. It could result in the sacrifice of certain individuals' good for the collective good. So utilitarian allows for some people to be sacrificed, their good to be sacrificed, if it benefits the common good, the collective good. Everyone. So we no matter who the individuals are, we could sacrifice some of their good.
I think we can sacrifice a human for animal.
Good question. I'm not sure. If we included animals' well-being, well, it might, from a utilitarian point of view, it might be acceptable, might be morally right to take the life of a few human beings to save a species, for example. This is non-religious. There's no view of the human being as someone special, as a special being or a sacred being. All beings are pretty. We're all sentient beings. We're all animals, really. From the humans are animals. We exist in human bodies we have a particular physical. We're mammals. We're sentient mammals, like any number of other sentient mammals.
So if there were a poster going after animals on a reserve,
yeah.
then
Yeah, that's a very good example. Yeah,
can you justify taking animals' life for our good when we can't measure, that then killing animals for our pleasure would be also work
Yeah.
collectively, right?
Yeah.
Vice versa.
Yeah. Util
Okay.
is, for example, hunting
Right. Yeah.
may be morally acceptable from a utilitarian point of view if the pleasure derived from the hunt of the human hunter derives greater pleasure than the pain and suffering of the animal killed.
So if one animal could feed a family and they used many parts of the animal and
Yeah.
did all those things, then that might be considered okay. But
Yes.
not just
But hunting for pleasure could also be, right?
Possibly.
Yeah. That's
And here we have a measurement problem.
Yeah.
How do we determine this really?
Um,
But certainly, killing animals for food
right.
is potentially morally right from a utilitarian point of view, as Nicole suggested. So the killing of the buffalo on the Dakota Plain, South Dakota's part of the U.S., killing a buffalo by the Native Americans would feed many people and clothe many people, the skin. They would use every part of the buffalo, this huge animal, and would provide food for many for weeks, one buffalo. And now, from a utilitarian point of view, hunting and killing a buffalo would be morally right because it maximized aggregate utility. Not all utilitarians, I think, include all sentient beings, and the general focus has been on human beings, but there is a possibility of considering other life forms, other beings in the calculation. But we could, to make things simpler, we could just think about human beings.
I have a question. This political theory, is this based on something that's existing right now today, or is this something based on something that can be measured maybe 100 years ago?
Oh, it exists today. There are utilitarians among us. Definitely. There are many utilitarians among us. Maybe in this very room is a utilitarian. No, it's I'm kidding. Trying to be playful. No, it's a current theory. There are, and as I suggested earlier, it's taken in some form taken more of an economic turn. And you just notice justifications for various governmental policies, and including educational policies. Notice that the justification is often expressed in utilitarian terms, usually economic utilitarian terms.
That's why you see more economists discussing it than you would
Yeah.
anybody else.
So a lot of educational policies justified to the public in terms of, well, this will increase economic productivity, and therefore it's worth the investment. It's the right thing to do. So we need to increase mathematical and scientific literacy in the population. Why is that the right thing to do? Because it will maximize economic utility. Very common standard argument. I hear this thing all the time. Even the even the DACA debate. Most of the justification of DACA is that the dreamers contribute so much to the economic productivity of the country, and that if we deported them, that would result in a decrease in economic productivity and thereby economic wealth. And therefore, we should give them resident status. We shouldn't change their status. They should stay in the country because they're productive. They're economically productive. They've gone to school. They're good citizens. They don't cause problems, and they work. And they're in. Google has hired 200 of them. They must be good, and the program must be good. I heard that last more than once. Have you? That's a utilitarian argument. So one of the problems is that it blurs and fudges individual integrity and is susceptible to trade-offs, trading the individual good for the collective good. And as we'll see later, when we consider the deontological position, this is one of their main complaints, main criticism of utilitarianism in particular, is that it doesn't honor and live up to our duty to respect the rights of all individuals as inviolable rights, inalienable rights. There are no inalienable rights in utilitarianism. Someone's liberty, someone's even life could be taken on utilitarian grounds and be right, be just, if it maximizes aggregate utility. So that's a problem for some. Big problem. Houston, we have a problem. Bentham once was asked about human rights, whether he believed in human rights or thought human rights were valid. And Bentham replied, "Human rights are nonsense on stilts." The idea of human rights is nonsense on stilts. Interesting.
Well, I'm teaching right now this unit, so it just reminds me of it. It just sounds a lot like, the way Hitler was able during war, in Germany, he was able to use that argument that, because they were using basically, the public good of the Germans at the expense of what he was using.
Yeah.
Like every move he made, the reason he got so many Germans on board was because economics was the problem after World War I in Germany. So what can we do to increase our economic aggregate utility? And he found all these ways to do it that people were able to accept crazily because of that common argument that he made.
The flaw there is that he didn't consider all human beings in the calculation.
Yeah, well, because they weren't considered human beings. He made them.
Right.
Yeah, he made a line,
Including everyone else, the English, the French, the Poles, the Russians, the Slovaks, the Czechs, let alone the Jews and the Gypsies, and the mentally disabled and the mentally ill. Yeah. So we couldn't say that Nazism is utilitarian because of that. Because it takes that slice, right? It doesn't consider all those affected and enter their happiness or satisfaction in the equation. He just left them out. So what is good for the German people is what is right. But that's a distortion of utilitarianism. Yeah. So to be if Hitler was if the Nazis were real utilitarians, they would have had to consider the well-being, the happiness of all affected by their actions, including the Jews and the communists, et cetera, which they did not, obviously. And there was you could argue that they were wrong. Nazism is unjust and wrong on strong utilitarian grounds because of its racial selectivity, mainly. But that's an interesting example. No.
Thinking of him sacrificing
Yeah,
what he thought
yeah,
was the common good.
yeah. That he made trade-offs,
Right.
and utilitarianism may be susceptible to those trade-offs. But an interesting case, though, would be here's a case for you. Decided on utilitarian grounds. During World War II, as you know, the Nazis were working on a atomic weapon. So they were really serious about acquiring or developing an atomic weapon, and the U.S. was in a race with them. And apparently, to have an atomic weapon, you need what they called heavy water. It's an extra hydrogen element to the water. It's rare. It has to be produced. There's not a lot of it. And the Allied intelligence got the intelligence that there was a shipment of heavy water traveling in the Baltic Sea, headed for Germany. That was essential for the atomic program of the Nazis. The problem was there were going to be about 100 civilians on board the boat, the ship, carrying the heavy water, secretly carrying the heavy water. The question is, should you bomb the boat, killing the 100 people, but destroying the heavy water and really delaying the development of an atomic weapon for the Nazis? Now, if the Nazis had an atomic weapon, they would have certainly used it, no doubt. They would probably have incinerated London, among other places. Was it right of course they destroyed the ship and the heavy water, killing 100-odd people. Innocent people were killed. From a utilitarian point of view, that was exactly right to do. Killing 100 people to save millions is the right thing to do. So we're going to trade off. In this case, we trade off the lives of a few for the good of the many.
Well, again, they use the same argument too when Truman and the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
They did.
Didn't want the war to continue, so they said this is the best way to save more lives is to take these lives of these Japanese.
That's right.
And that's what he said. Truman said, well, if I would not have done this, the war would have continued and we would have lost more lives. So he said, my trade-off, I'm justifying killing all these people because I was saving so many more dying in the future.
Yeah. Is that a valid argument?
Mm-hmm.
It's a tough one.
Mm-hmm.
Utilitarian would say, of course it is. It's absolutely clear. Absolutely right. No doubt about it. Others would say that wasn't right on different grounds. It's a tough one. That's a tough one.
Couldn't you even think, this is more pop culture, but maybe because I watched the movie over the weekend, but if you think about it, like Batman and Robin, or Batman and like the Joker movie, you know, the scary one that freaks me out with Heath Ledger and everything like that. But like Batman could kill the Joker numerous times or to kill him, but Batman wants to throw him in jail and do what's just. Where the Joker can go around and kill a bunch of people and continues to kill people, but Batman he doesn't kill the Joker because he's thinking for the better good, but he throws him in jail and he knows that the Joker is going to break out of jail and go kill more people. But is it just that he doesn't kill the Joker?
I think our society is really obsessed with that question. It's
Yeah.
everywhere. Yeah. And I think it's because the military has to make that decision all the time, right? When they're fighting, they have to decide, do we blow up this plant knowing this bad guy's in it when there's 50 other not
When
bad
there's
people in it?
civilians,
Right.
you know, and all these civilians
Right.
are
But I just think
there,
our
but
society
do we-
struggles with that a lot.
Yeah.
And yeah, like half the movies, it's right, and half the movies, it's wrong.
and you hate the Joker, and you just want the Joker to die in the movie. He's so evil.
Yeah.
You just want him to die, but then it doesn't.
They don't want the story to end.
Yeah. It's Hollywood.
Maybe Batman's a deontologist.
Right. Well, that idea is there any justification for taking someone's life, right? Whose job is that? Who gets to decide that?
Well, and that, but it's more the death penalty and
Right.
who is
Yeah.
it? You know.
Right.
So if we have mass murderer, serial killer
Right.
on the loose, should we kill them because they're going to kill others? But what's the justification for killing them?
Yeah, I think that's
When the society hates the person, they will tell them he is a killer, even if he did the right thing. But the society loves this person, they will tell he did an amazing thing. It depends on the society and their view of the person who did that. That's what I think.
like a military person who kills a bunch of people. Right. Could
But
be
they're
a hero.
doing it to protect
be a hero.
liberty and all those.
Yeah.
Isn't that partially like where the practicality gets into things? Because in our culture, we have people that we might put to death, but their path through the justice system is not actually just. So the story that we're given says they should be put to death. So I feel like ideally it works, but sometimes putting it into practice then and saying this person committed these crimes, they deserve this punishment, but they're not getting the right protection under the law, the right person to, the right lawyer to defend them, the right evidence to come forward, then in practical ways it doesn't work the same as it does when we ideally.
But if we kill that one person, saves all these other people.
But that's what they say. But sometimes you have large populations that go through the justice system, black men, and they are by far numbers, put through an unfair system and given an unfair punishment, and compared to other people who see justice through the system in some way. So I feel like the narrative is an utilitarian argument, but the real things that are happening are not based on actual utilitarian processes.
Yeah. A utilitarian, though, would insist on the fairness of the process. That if the legal process is unbiased, partial, etc., discriminatory, that will lead to a diminishment of aggregate utility. So a rule utilitarian would probably come to the conclusion that fair impartial procedures are necessary, are right, to maximize utility.
Because then you would just say that would be a trade-off that we're.
Yeah.
Could
Yeah,
be a
would
trade-off of
yeah.
an unjustice system for the
Yeah.
betterment of all.
Could scapegoating be could scapegoating be right, morally right from a utilitarian point of view? I wonder. Like, if we just convict this innocent person, then in this situation, this will benefit the collective more so than not. letting him go. I wonder.
It goes back to the end justifies the means. Is that what you're trying to say?
Well, yes.
And is there then a difference between benefit to people and make them happy? Because if you put an innocent person behind bars, you may make people happy, but do you really benefit them? Because the person would have been no danger in the first place. They may believe that they're
Yeah.
safer.
But it depends on what you go by benefit.
That's what I mean. Like, is there a difference
They
between
may riot
happiness
if they
and
find out
benefit?
the truth, and then you're not really benefit, like, I just think whoever
Or-
decides what that benefit is.
Or it's, we hear the story of, you killed my brother, I hate you, I feel pleasure that you're in jail, that you're never going to get out, or that you're going to be put to death. Did you kill my brother?
It's unclear. Another, besides trade-offs, another core problem with utilitarianism is adaptive preference formation. And this is the idea that preference satisfaction is not reliable as a good because our preferences are adaptable and the satisfaction of them are adaptable to our social circumstance. So the level of our satisfaction is in many ways contingent upon our existing social status, and therefore is not a good measure of the good or the right. Because individuals by social class, for example, a person with a great amount of wealth, their satisfaction in order to satisfy them, you would need great wealth, right? And a person living in poverty adapts their level of satisfaction to something meager. If I just have a piece of bread, then I'll be satisfied. Or if I could sleep one night in a bed, I'll be satisfied. So and I think this is true. We tend to adapt our preferences and the satisfaction of those preferences to our particular social standing. So it's really it creates distortions in the calculation, and also pleasure and pain. Pleasure and pain might be adaptable as well to our circumstance. So preferences are socially constructed. They mirror the state of justice in society already. So not a good measure, this argument suggests, of what is good.